waiting at baggage claim, standing over my suitcase and my Nintendo Switch with my headphones on, just crying.
Hi, and welcome back to Quest Markers. On this show, we talk about video games and the stories they tell with a big focus on narrative. My name is Marina. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a video game composer, vocalist, audio engineer, and your host. Today, we're talking about two games, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. Spoiler warning, we covered the entirety of both games, and we also talk about Xenoblade 1. In this episode, we talk about Xenoblade 2 and 3's characters and music, whether Xenoblade 2's DLC is better than the base game, and what we thought about Xenoblade 3's ending. Today's guest is Xander from Xander's Cut, a YouTuber who focuses on gaming and film videos. Thank you for being here, and let's get into it. Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the lovely intro.
Thank you so much for being here. How are you staying hydrated? What are you drinking?
I've got a little limoncello LaCroix here. I'm not sponsored, but
fancy.
I'm a big sparkling water guy, and I think in my expertise as a self-proclaimed LaCroix connoisseur, I think limoncello is the top dog. So if y'all have any other recommendations of like some really obscure ones, then go ahead. But I think I've searched far and wide. This seems to be the GOAT. How about yourself?
Oh, I want one now. I love a fun little sparkling drink. I have like a leftover iced coffee from this afternoon.
Thank God. If you came out here with anything other than a caffeinated beverage, I would leave the call right now. Because this is the not the podcast I signed up for.
No, that's mandatory. And then I've also got some water. But man, I wish I had a sparkling drink now. I might have to go to the grocery store after this.
That's a fine priority in my book.
Absolutely. Because it's so good. I don't know. It helps me stay hydrated when I have something fun to drink.
Yeah, and I find that if you ever have any sort of like sugar craving, even like it's more than just water, even if it's really not that much.
You might just be dehydrated.
Maybe we're spreading the good word here on the Quest Markers.
There you go. Exactly. Would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think Marina did a pretty good job. My name is Xander from the humble little YouTube channel called Xander's Cut. I like to write nerdy little video essays on all my favorite little pieces of media, usually games and movies, and a franchise that sort of got my channel a little off the ground, I suppose. My first little baby internet brownie points were from my coverage of the Xenoblade series, which is a very near and dear franchise to my heart and a tad bit relevant to today, but we'll get into that.
I love it. What are you currently playing?
Ooh, I am about a third into Final Fantasy X. I've had a couple people encouraging me like to jump back in, because I started it like 3 years ago. I got like 11 hours in or so, and I just put it down, not because I wasn't enjoying it, but just because it happens. And I figured, I'm finally going to commit to this. I'm going to pick it up. And I got past where I was. I started a fresh save. And
nice.
Yeah, I'm really digging it. I just want to play more Final Fantasies because I feel like I play way too much just 7 compilation. So this will be my third main line. I played 16 as well. But yeah.
Nice. Oh man, I didn't realize this is your first FF10 playthrough. I hope you like it. I love FF10.
I'm digging it. It's that perfect. It's so goofy, which is I think what an element that I really adore in Final Fantasy. A big part of the franchise that just made me love it. And I mean, I know it's going to get kind of dour down the line, and I like what they're setting up with Tidus and his dad. So we shall see. I mean, I like the characters. I think it's a jam. Soundtrack is phenomenal. I'm liking the combat way more than I thought I would. But yeah, I mean, only time would tell. I think I've heard it's one of those games that just gets better the deeper you go.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Without knowing where you are, I won't say anything. But yeah, oh, so good, so good, man. I wish I could play 10 for the first time. I was gonna jump back into 9 because I bought 9 ages ago on the Switch, and I haven't played it. But now I'm in this place of waiting for the Elden Ring DLC. I'm like, I don't think that I can start something until Shadow of the Erdtree comes out because I don't want to be distracted.
Yeah, I get it.
So yeah, a Hades run here and there is always fun. I'm eternally playing Final Fantasy 14.
Awesome.
So yeah, but really, really looking forward to the Elden Ring DLC. And I never thought I'd be a Souls player. But speaking of games with massive worlds, we are not here to talk about Elden Ring. We're here to talk about Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 3. And I'm so excited to dig in. I'll kick us off with a story summary. And these are going to be a little bit on the high level side, just to remind everyone of the story's flow, because both games are really, really, there's a lot of story and narrative in both of them. So we'll start with Xenoblade 2's Torna DLC, because this sets up the base game. And it tells the story of Adam and Mythra, a driver and legendary blade respectively, fighting Malos, another legendary blade. In Xenoblade 2, a blade is a being that's born again and again from something called a core crystal, and a driver is the blade's current human companion. When a driver dies, the blade returns to their core crystal, and it sends data about the world back to a supercomputer. And the intention behind collecting this data is to provide evolutionary data for future blades. But going back to the story, in the end of the DLC, as Mythra and Malos fought, Mythra unleashed her true power, defeating Malos, but also becoming responsible for destroying the Titan Torna. And this is important not only because of the lives lost, but also because Titans are these ancient beings that are also continents in this world, the Cloud Sea of Alrest. Mythra can't process the result of her devastating actions, and her grief literally tears her apart into Pyra, a new being, with Mythra sealing herself away. Fast forward 500 years later, Malos becomes a threat again, but this time we follow a driver named Rex who awakens Pyra and eventually Mythra. Because Titans are dying at an unprecedented rate at this point, thus reducing the livable landmass for the people of Alrest, Rex's goal is to reach a place called Elysium, located up in the World Tree, to provide people a more permanent home. Here, our gang, consisting of Rex, Pyra, Mythra, Nia, Dromark, Morag, Brigid, Zeke, Pandora, Poppy, and Tora, that's a big party, meets with the architect, the creator of this world. They defeat Malos, and they find out that Elysium, this place that they were striving to get to this whole time, is now a wasteland. And in the end, the World Tree falls in the aftermath of the battle against Malos, and the remaining Titans all pull together to create a new continent for this new world. I realize I left out a lot of details, but we'll dig in. We'll dig in. How was that for Xenoblade 2?
I think we're good. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it for now. Otherwise, we're here for like a good 3 hours. But yeah. No, that'll get us started for sure.
Amazing. I mean, it's like an 80+ hour base game if you don't do any side quests. So
yeah, depending on how you play it. I mean, it's hefty. I 100%ed it, I think, a year or two ago.
No.
Yeah, it took me around 220 hours in total. I think you can do that a lot. I think you can do that a lot quicker if you actually know what you're doing. But it was a casual run, but had a good time overall. It was worth it.
Wow. I didn't, and it still took me like 70 to 80 hours. Let's switch gears to Xenoblade 3. So Xenoblade 3 takes place in a world called Ionios, with two opposing nations, Kevis and Agnes, being in an endless conflict, with its citizens only living up to 10 years, or denizens, I should say. Each military unit fights opposing ones to create red particles in their flame clock of life, or Pharaonis, in order to extend their lives to the full 10 years. And this is dark stuff to only live 10 years. Our protagonists, Noah, Lance, Uni, Mio, Tyon, and Senna, half being from Kevis and half being from Agnes, one day become Ouroboros, these like fused gigantic beings, which makes them dangerous and thus fugitives of both nations. They band together for their mutual survival and end up learning that they're stuck in this endless loop of war because the worlds of Bionis from Xenoblade 1 and Allrest from Xenoblade 2, these parallel universes, were drawn to each other and would inevitably collide together. And I get this visual of like planets colliding together, which would destroy all life on both worlds. But the people's fears and anxieties from this tragedy manifested itself into our main villain, Moebius, or villains. When the two worlds were just about to collide, Moebius corrupted something called Origin, an arc not only storing all the world's data, but also a system capable of rebooting both worlds during this collision to ensure the survival of all the people. Origin was created by Melia from Bionis and Nia from Allrest in a collaborative effort. And in the end, our heroes defeat Moebius, and with Origin reactivated, the reconstruction process for both worlds successfully proceeds, but in a bittersweet ending requiring the people of Kevis and Agnes to be separated and returned to their respective worlds. Even though the ending is a bit ambiguous, but I'm just going to leave it there.
Good call.
How was that for Xenoblade 3?
Again, I think you did the best you could with that word count.
Brilliant. Well, let's dig right in. And you mentioned earlier that, one of the videos that you made that was one of the first that blew up on YouTube was a video about Xenoblade 2. I think it was the Pyra and Mythra one.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
So with that in mind, I'd love to talk about them as characters. And to summarize, in this video, you talk about symbolically, like Pyra's name and design are references to fire, but Mythra's the one with a fiery personality. And then Mythra represents, divine sacred light, but Pyra is the one with a softer personality. And I'd like to dig into this a little bit because, I think their story is really a story of trauma and overcoming trauma. Because as we know, they're the same person. They've gone through a lot. That pain split their very being. And I just love the juxtaposition between them and how they both capture different stages of grief. If you look at it from that lens, with Mythra being more, arguably encompassing anger, and Pyra encompassing more sadness. So I wanted to start off with that because I think there's a complexity to them as characters and people who have gone through so much and who are also stuck in eternity. Like they're not going anywhere because they're blades, and they're legendary blades as well. So there's there's an eternity behind them and an eternity in front of them. So I wanted to start there, and I'd love to get your thoughts. Maybe a couple years after this video was released. And maybe after your 100% playthrough of the game, what your thoughts are on them as characters.
Yeah, 100%. I'm happy to report that I think the more you explore these characters and try to put yourself behind their eyes, the more you will inevitably appreciate them and just how extraordinarily well written they are. It constantly blows my mind how what they achieved is even possible, because it is like it's a relatively high, like, cerebral concept. Just having these two people sharing a form, the flipping in and out, and one of them created each other, and that's like a manifestation of all her insecurities. And there's still, I think, a big confusion, maybe from like non-fans of the series, is like, oh, they're like the same person, right? And I think it is, while their arcs are comparable, they're adjacent to each other and both in the same thematic space, they are still very, very distinct in the sense that, like you mentioned, they encompass very different sides of grief. I think the most compelling difference is that Mythra experienced it firsthand, and then her coping mechanism, right, is to put Pyra in front of her as this front to absorb all this contrition. So she doesn't have to be a burden to others, but two, just because she doesn't want to show herself, really. And that is its own beast. And then within that, you have Pyra, who I think often gets the short end of the stick, but really I think she has such a poignant inner conflict, because if you think about it, she's never really gotten any time to be her own person. I think there was like around a month in between the events of the Torna's ending and when she was put to sleep in the Cloud Sea. So, and during that time, she's probably being, ordered around, decisions being made for her, Adam deciding, we don't deserve you as humans. We're going to put you away until, we deserve your presence and we're worthy of you. And her job is just to stand there and be as cooperative as possible and make this easy enough for everyone, especially Mythra. So when Xenoblade 2, the actual timeline comes around, when Rex is bonds with her, they're coming from this place of two unique spaces of, I don't want to exist because I don't feel like I have any purpose in this world. It's the same goal, but it's coming from very different perspectives still. And what I love is that Rex also mirrors this to a degree, as he's thrust into this position of the Aegis's driver. And he is constantly trying to prove his worth, live up to the status of a legendary hero that is Adam. And he keeps failing. This game lets him fail over and over. So they're essentially growing together as driver and blade. And I think that's what makes them such like perfect leading characters for this game.
I love how you put all of that. And I feel like I want to jump in with with an opinion that I don't think everyone's going to agree with me on.
Okay.
But just on the last thing that you said, I actually enjoyed Adam and Mythra's story more than Rex and Pyra and Mythra's. And in general, I enjoyed Torna more than the base game of Xenoblade 2 story-wise. So what do you think there? I mean, I'm happy to go first and elaborate, but I'm curious kind of what your knee-jerk reaction is to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hopefully isn't like, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's like as contentious of an opinion as you might think, because I don't know, maybe it's a loud minority, but I've heard a lot of praise for Torna, and a lot of people regard it as, and it does absolutely fix a lot of problems with Xenoblade 2. And it is overall obviously a more concise experience. And that ending is just wild. I mean, it's the best ending to any DLC I think I've ever played. I mean, as I can remember in recent memory. And I think Adam and Mythra is a fantastic setup. You see Mythra's maturation. It's like she gets her own character arc and gets to be a little bit of her own person before she's Rex's blade. And we see her value her status as an Aegis, and that translates to this guilt she is forced to bear throughout Xenoblade 2. And I guess something I love about Adam is that he really subverts your expectations. I don't know if you had this reaction, but it's almost like a Zach Fair scenario for me, because I remember thinking, yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
I remember thinking, wait, if Cloud was trying to, mimic Zach, without getting into too much spoilers, you'd think Zach was a little bit more edgy, but he's a total goofball. And throughout Xenoblade 2, you have Adam. He's in this cloak this whole time. You never see his face. I'm pretty sure that was because they didn't have the model done, or they didn't finalize the design, so they just robed him for the whole game. And he's so ominous, and he's giving Rex this sage wisdom. And then you see him in Torna, and then he is just this total... He's so jovial and upbeat, and he's like crying over Jin and Laura's story, and Mythra's rolling her eyes. I get where you're coming from. I enjoy it quite a lot as well. It is just such a fun dynamic, and definitely something that doesn't feel I can't think of another Xenoblade relationship that scratches that itch where it's like Adam and his practice daughter, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually one of the main reasons why I love the DLC so much is that before going into it, well, I knew nothing about it going into it. But to your point, Adam as this like, legendary hero. And he founded, Rex's hometown. And so we all have this perception of like, oh, Adam must be this like really powerful, really serious character. And then you get into Torna and it's like, good guy Adam. He's lighthearted. He's very likable. I actually have a quote. So the very first cutscene where we meet him, Adam and Mythra fight Laura and Jin, and Adam extends his hand during a pause in the battle and he goes, quote, "You, incredible, you, both of you, that last attack, the force behind it was absurd. I'm amazed." End quote. And it's like, it's so, I was like, what? This is Adam? And, he's this well-respected figure in Torna. He's a lord, but he's also just like some dude. Yeah. And he's also, a fatherly figure to Mythra. And if you do, there's one side quest where you learn that Adam's wife is pregnant. So to your point, like Mythra is kind of his first daughter before the birth of his actual daughter. So it's there was a sense of levity despite, a very serious ending that Adam brought as a character that I thought was really unique. And was a center point to why I enjoyed Torna so much. So good.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. I think to add on to what you said about like the side quest with his wife, I think since it's well known that when you awaken a core crystal for the first time, often the blade adopts a lot of either traits that the driver has or almost like molds around to be a fitting companion for the driver. Like we see that with Laura and Hayes, how they look identical, and Zeke and Pandoria are surely them being that in sync is just nature for them. And I think Adam and Mythra is an interesting. Oh yeah, and obviously Malos and Amalthus. But I think Adam and Mythra is like he probably at that time. He knew he was going to be a dad. He was probably really concerned about it. And I guess this was like the architect's way of answering his anxiety. I don't know. I think that's the running theory anyway. Yeah.
I love that take. That's a great take. But I'm a big Adam fan. Huge Adam fan.
Such a good guy.
I would love to talk about the music in these games because it's one of my favorite parts about the Xenoblade games. And shout out for Xenoblade 2 and 3 to the composers Yasunori Matsuda, Kenji Hiramatsu, Manami Kyoda, and Mariam Abunasser. The music in these games is just incredible. And when I look at it, from Xenoblade 2, my absolute favorite song in that game, there's a lot of good music, but it's Elysium in the Dream. And I was actually listening to it as I was writing my notes for this episode, and I teared up. Like, it's just one of those songs that it makes me cry every time that I listen to it. And I think it captures Pyra and Mythra's internal struggle as well, of like being this weapon of destruction and wanting to remove themselves from ever doing harm again. But then it also captures like Rex's very desperate attempt to reach Elysium to give the people of Allrest a permanent home because Titans are dying. But then you get there and Elysium is a wasteland and that dream is ripped away. I think the song just captures sorrow really beautifully. And there's a feeling of longing that's really unmatched. And then in Xenoblade 3, one of my favorites that I don't think is talked about at all is the very first song. It's called Battlefield.
Nice.
And I think it sets the perfect tone for the game. Like, it's fast, it's anxious, there's a hint of sadness. It sets the stage for, opposing warring nations who are just hoping to survive. And then, of course, A Life Sent On, which is the flute duet recorded on custom flutes.
So cool. Yeah.
It's so cool. But yeah, it represents the music that Offseers play when they're seeing off souls who have departed this world during battle. And it's just, again, it's so sad. Like, it captures the sadness of a life being taken away. But anyway, I've been rambling a lot about these games,
No,
music.
that's awesome.
So I'd love to hear kind of, do you have any pieces that stick out for you?
Yeah, 100%. I think the song in Xenoblade 2, I mean, it's hard because it's such an eclectic soundtrack. I mean, I love that you've got your battle themes, you've got your cutscene themes, you've got your area themes, and then they've got these really goofy songs, which I don't think they don't have too many of those in the 3. They might have them in 1, but like Anapon's Life is super goofy. That's not my favorite song in the world, but it's like, I think it's hilarious. Yeah, I think my favorite track overall is going to be the Tomorrow with You. I think it plays 2 or 3 times. Most notably, when they're fighting Jin and Malos on the cliffs of Moritha, and they're begging him, Rex, give up, leave us, don't worry about us, go to Elysium by yourself, save humanity yourself. And he reassures them that they are valued, and he's come all this way. This has been their journey together. And is this lovely speech. I know it ends with join me. I don't care. I love it. It's such a joy. I mean, it's such a gorgeous track. It integrates leitmotifs from throughout the game. It swells with these gorgeous strings, and then it ends with these triumphant horns. And it's crazy how that song builds, and it'll never get old for me. Amazing track in my eyes. I think for Xenoblade 3, I really like the Moebius battle theme, obviously. That's kind of a generic pick, though, because it's really spooky, and it really caught me off guard the first time I heard it.
It's a really good one.
But I think my overall favorite track is called Lost Days of Warmth, and that's the one that plays during the baby scenes. When they're seeing a baby for the first time, and when Noah and Mio have their child in one of the iterations of NNM, and it just captures this innocence, which is such a precious sort of bit of levity. And like Xenoblade 3, so much of it is about like the beauty of mortality, and it really gets you to take a step back and appreciate that. And I think it serves its function and intention perfectly. Yeah.
Oh, those are great picks. I also wanted to, maybe on a very different note, add Counterattack as an honorable mention.
Absolutely.
Which is the song that plays, I mean, it plays a lot in Xenoblade 2. It plays a lot,
yeah.
It plays when Mythra awakens. It just, everything about that song.
Chills. I was so frustrated because when Pyra and Mythra got into Smash, they had a Counterattack remix. They didn't put Counterattack in the game. And I don't think this is a hot take, but the remix is so much worse.
Oh no, I haven't listened to it in a really long time.
It's mixed really strangely, yeah.
Because they rearrange and remix all the songs for Smash. But I main Pyra and Mythra and Sephiroth, I guess.
Great choices.
Smash, so. Oh man, so good. Let's maybe switch gears and talk about Xenoblade 3. And I mean, we have to start by talking about Chapter 5's ending, where, quote unquote, Mio dies. Like, what an iconic moment in that game. And I remember playing it. There's a really long, from what I remember, maybe I was just waiting for the payoff, but it felt like there was a really, really long build up to it because, the rest of the group is thrown in prison while they wait for, Mio's send off. And it's just like, it felt like B-roll after B-roll over, beautiful music, just like waiting until Mio is sent off or like dies, in a sense, or disappears from the world. And I just remember like, wait, they're not actually doing this. What do you mean? You're creating this relationship between this character and the player, and this beautiful relationship between Mio and Noah. What do you mean? What?
Yeah.
And we later learn that's not the case. But at the end of Chapter 5, you're just sitting there. Like, I put the controller down and I was like, what? So I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of how you felt. What were you feeling as you played through that? Because they put everything behind that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the best sequences in the entire trilogy, easily. I think I have a funny story about this, actually. I played the first half or so, a lot of Xenoblade 3 in handheld mode. I was away from home. I was visiting my brother. But it was release day. I had to beat the game as soon as possible because I didn't want to get spoiled. And I wanted to make a video on it as well. So I was really rushing to get through this. No side quests. I just beelined the whole thing. And I was on the plane back, going back home, and I was playing, I think it was the boss fight when you fight M for the first time, and obviously when they actually switch, but you don't know. And I think in that moment, like Lons and Senna, they're about to sacrifice themselves. And I was tearing up. I was like, man, this game's good. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, after this boss fight, I'm going to save the game because the flight we were about to land. I had to get ready.
Oh, no.
And we start going through the prison sequence. I'm like, I can't put this down.
Oh, no.
So we have to get off the plane. We're getting off. And I'm watching this prison sequence. I got my headphones on. I'm like, I can't just stop playing this game. So I'm sitting, waiting at baggage claim, standing over my suitcase and my Nintendo Switch with my headphones on, just crying. I'm like, what is going on? This game? Could I not have experienced this for the first time in, the comfort of my own home? But it was stellar, and I so badly just wanted to, the driving home, just sit in the car and play through that thing. But I got right back to it afterwards. It is, I think everyone had that reaction. Like, there's no way they just like pulled an Aerith, right? Like, no one does that. No one did that back then. No one does it ever again. Like, it's wild, and they didn't. But I think it's still, obviously, it's not like it's just I wouldn't say it's a total cop out, because it still holds a significant amount of weight for M and N. It's just, it's still conveying the same idea. You just don't realize the actual like granular logistics of it yet. And then you get lore dump, and then it makes sense. Your mind explodes. And then you have that amazing scene where N is screaming, Mio, why would you do this to me? I think. And then you have that gorgeous vocal track. I think it's called A Step Away, I believe. It is just, it's peak Xenoblade. It's one of like top 3 sequences in the entire franchise.
Oh man, I can't believe that you played that at baggage claim or had to go through that during baggage claim. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's a funny story. It's worth it.
Oh, that's funny. I'm glad I asked now, because that's a great story.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I don't think that it was a cop-out, because we got to see N's reaction to M dying, leaving the world. But I wanted to jump topics, because I think this is a really big one. What are your thoughts on Xenoblade 2's final act and or ending? Like, I think we can talk about kind of everything that happens post chapter 5, or all the big story beats there.
Xenoblade 2 or 3? I think you meant
3. Sorry. And our thoughts on Moebius. I know I'm throwing a lot into the mix here, but maybe to give some context, I remember, when we start learning about like the actual story of what's going on, of like, this entire time we're like, oh, well, the ending of Xenoblade 1 is that, there's this new world. And so I went into the game being like, oh, this is the new world. The 2 worlds are merged. And that's not the case at all. Xenoblade 1's world and Xenoblade 2's world, so the world of Bionis and the world of Allrest, are just parallel universes or parallel planets. And they, as I mentioned in the summary, were kind of converging together. They were drawn to each other, and it was going to cause, essentially an explosion. Like, they were just going to merge and get destroyed in the process. And I so wish that they had chosen to merge the world of Xenoblade 1 and 2 based on Shulk's and the Architect's actions, especially because those games happen in tandem timeline-wise. And the cutscene in Xenoblade 2, where we get a zoom in into the Architect and you see, you know, his shadow half is fighting Shulk in Xenoblade 1. Like, what an incredible moment. It blew me away, where I was like, oh my God. And Shulk gives this quote of, you know, today we fell a god. But, you know, at the end of Xenoblade 1, Shulk relinquishes his newfound godhood to create a new world devoid of gods. And Alvis says, quote, "This new world is boundless. It's home not only to you, but many other forms of life. I can see it. In this world, all life will walk towards the future hand in hand," end quote. And then Shulk goes, quote, "One day, I hope I can meet them all, the people of this endless world," end quote. Which is like, okay, great. Xenoblade 2's world doesn't implode or change, but it continues on when the Titans merge with the land, ensuring everyone's survival. So why was there no continuity with Xenoblade 3 being in this new world that Alvis was talking about? And I think maybe I just don't know the lore well enough, but it felt like Xenoblade 3 erased some of that. You know, it talks about, again, the two worlds having their own respective futures, but they yearned for each other and eventually intersected. And I was very confused. I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I remember after the final boss battle, the very, very ending, when both groups, the Kevis and Agnes groups, are like, well, guess we'll never see each other ever again, just caught me completely off guard. I was like, what do you mean? I feel like, you know, in a narrative, it feels really good when there's foreshadowing and when there's buildup, even if it's subtle, because then when you replay something, you're like, oh, I can see the little bits and pieces that are leading up to this thing. And here it just felt like I was blindsided. You know, my friends that I have spoken to about this game all felt blindsided. So this is very, very long-winded. But I wanted to get your thoughts on kind of the final act, the ending, and then, you know, we can maybe talk about Moebius after. If you want to jump in with Moebius now, we can talk about it now. But yeah, curious to get your take.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. I think the general consensus for this game is like, oh my gosh, 10 out of 10 masterpiece. I think it tied up the entire trilogy perfectly. It was masterminds. I mean, give credit where credit's due. It is a very good game. I think I'm definitely with you in the minority that thinks the ending was kind of messy, and that having the worlds be separate was a bit contrived. I want to say that was the original intention, that the worlds would merge, but then this is total conjecture, but I feel like they fell in love with the idea of this love that can never be, right? And that they have to split at the end anyway. And they're like, okay, we have to play with that. And to be fair, I still cried. It was still really sad. But what you're saying about foreshadowing, I mean, yeah, that is like the basis for like quality storytelling. Otherwise it just feels cheap, and like the rug's been pulled, and it's not satisfying, because a good twist, or even just good plot beats in general, they're set up, they're foreshadowed, and that's what makes them feel like they were intentional, because they were. And I think, well, the like final act is very strange because you have this lore dump, and then you go on this like the pacing is totally awkward, and you go on this like a little fetch quest to like fix a boat, and then you arrive at Origin, and then you defeat and I guess this is where we get into Moebius. I think at one point I said Moebius were like the worst villains in this series, and to a degree I still agree with that. But they've grown on me a lot, because I think conceptually they're very sound, and thematically it's really, really smart, because they're basically just like, Xenoblade 3 is a big critique of capitalism, really. If you think about it, you have Zed, he's this big dictator, big man up top, and he's pitting the marginalized against each other in this cycle of war and death, and he's harvesting their life via the flame clocks to benefit himself. I mean, it's clear as day when you as soon as you make that connection. And I really like that, but I think when you get a little bit more, when you zoom in and start to ask questions about each individual character, it starts to crumble a little bit. Because there's this one scene where Zed is asked his motivations and he literally says, because it amuses me. And sure, I'm sure there's some billionaire out there who would say the exact same thing. Who knows? But I feel like it could have been a little bit more compelling. And the character like Moebius, like some of them feel very out of the blue, like Chris, Noah's old friend. What was going on there? Yorin, I see what they were trying to do, but we've seen that before with Mumcar, and it just felt a little melodramatic. Maybe that's just me. You could go. There's a whole alphabet worth of them you could go down. So like as a group, I like what they stand for. Not like actually, but within the story. Like I think it is a quality concept. But I think they let some parts of Xenoblade 3 felt like they were more focused on the actual spectacle, and they were so ambitious that it was just too much. They couldn't go their focus. If it was more narrow, they could have maybe had a little bit more depth. Instead, we sort of have more of an ocean that is a bit shallow rather than a deep well. But that's just my 2 cents. Yeah.
Whoa, I've never taken. I'm gonna have to think about that after we finish recording. I had never taken that lens on Moebius. I have a lot to say about Moebius. I'll maybe leave it at, and not to sound like really pedantic, but you know, if Moebius is meant to be the manifestation of people's fears and anxieties, which is what we're told, then how come our heroes can't use, you know, hope or anger or whatever other emotion to, I don't know, create the world's strongest sword, right? Like I really appreciate like a good magic system that explains all the rules, because then when you break the rules of that magic system, it holds that much more weight.
Yes.
And then you start to understand, well, what are the edge cases of the magic system and how does this work? And again, maybe I'm just being too pedantic, but yes, I agree with everything you said. I'm going to have to sit with that and think about it. Because that was really, really well said.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think like a core problem that you sort of have to overlook to appreciate is that like the way the inception of Moebius is absurd. Like people were just like so upset that like this guy was created. And I don't know, I've never been in that situation, who knows? But you definitely really have to suspend your disbelief. And yeah, I think I was sort of mentioning this to you before, but again, I like what he stands for. Like the endless now, it feels like a middle ground in between the focuses of Xenoblade 1 and 2. The Xenoblade 1 very much focused on the future, paving your own path, rather than letting gods take the reins. And Xenoblade 2 is not letting the past define the present and the future. And I think Xenoblade 3 does a lot of things to try and connect the first 2 games while still doing its own thing. But I would be lying if I said the priorities still feel a little bit skewed, because it's definitely pretty muddy if you try to dissect everything the game's trying to say, because it's saying a lot. Yeah,
definitely. And as much as you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Moebius as a villain, but there are some really amazing characters in that game. So we're getting close to the hour mark, so maybe yeah, I know. Like I could go on for another few hours. I would love to get your thoughts on who your favorite character or maybe characters were in both 2 and 3.
Okay. Let's see. I mean, we already talked about Pyra and Rex, so I think I'm going to hand it to. I'm going to talk about Zeke because I think he's kind of underappreciated, because he really is like a he is much more than meets the eye. Like a great example is he in his first scene, like, he's a total clown. He's got his eye patch, and then Pandoria says like, "Oh, it's because we couldn't afford a second contact lens." Like, it's total goober. But then you realize, wait, that's not a contact lens for actually like his vision. That is to change the color of his eye, because all Tantalese people have golden eyes. Zeke does not. And Zeke's whole character is that he hates his country. He hates Tantal. He is livid at his father for them being this isolationist society, and they're all struggling because they're too afraid to come out. And because of that, he like changes his whole identity. He tries to detach himself from it as much as possible, brings Pandoria with him, and he has these like major trust issues because of that. And I think part of his arc that goes a little unnoticed is, with Rex, he sort of learns the value of being with a party, being with other people you can bounce ideas off of, rather than just him and Pandoria. And then I won't talk too much about Morag, but Morag is the complete opposite. She's totally loyal to her country through thick and thin. So between her and Zeke, there is this discussion of what's the moderate approach. And I think that's really compelling, and a lot of people sort of reduce him just to, comic relief, which is definitely a primary function of his character, but I do think there's more there. As for Xenoblade 3, I'm just going to have to go with N. I think he carries the game's villains on his back. He is just, he makes that game for me. And they do such a great job making him sympathetic. Like, you can see where he's coming from. You see all these iterations of Noah and Mio. They find each other every single time, but it ends in tragedy no matter what. So why wouldn't you take that route? And I think it really feeds into the thematic idea of like exploring the flaws of the endless now, and how, eventually things go stale, they stagnate, and that's dangerous. Like, we need to adapt, we need to grow as people. And because of that, it drives M to a point where she doesn't want to live anymore. And it is such a horrific dynamic that is explored with so much care, and is a great, like, it's essentially like them writing out on paper to Noah and Mio, like, this is not what to do. Choose hope instead, right? And it does get a little corny, like, you've embodied regret, N. But I still like it all in all. Yeah. Sorry, that was really long-winded, but go ahead.
No, I love it. I guess for me, Xenoblade 2, I mean, as I mentioned, Adam is so great. Like, what a great character. I do want to give a special shout out to Morag, though, because she was so powerful even without an Aegis blade like Pyra and Mythra, and yet was still able to defeat, I remember that cutscene so well, able to defeat Rex and Pyra and, the entire group with Brigid. And I was like, who's Morag? What's going on? Shout out to Morag. And then Xenoblade 3, I mean, I loved Uni so much. She was sarcastic and confident and funny and just so chaotic. I have a couple quotes pulled. These are battle quotes. The first one is, quote, "This one's looking at me funny. Hey, you." And then the second one's, "Gonna blast them into next week." End quote. Just like, just love the writing, love the delivery. Uni's a mood.
She's such a joy.
But I mean, the whole cast is amazing. Yeah, she really is such a joy.
I love, I think she has a campfire line where she says, "I'm going to rest my head right here, and there's nothing you can do about it." And then she's actually like got her head on Senna's shoulder there. And she always says Muppet. It's very, dig it. Yeah.
I love it.
All the casts of these games are knock out of the park. I don't know how they keep doing it.
Definitely very, very character driven.
Yeah.
All of them. All right. Well, let's wrap up. We've covered a lot of ground. A lot. But yeah, I wanted to open up the floor. Any final thoughts on these games or the future of Xenoblade?
Yeah, I mean, I think even with how dissatisfied I am with a lot of how this trilogy concluded, and even with Future Redeemed, I know you haven't played that yet, but I feel like it introduced a lot more questions for me. But the overwhelming majority adored it. So, take that with a grain of salt.
I just know that there's one character that talks about beans, like eating beans.
Matthew, I'm sure. I think that was him. Yeah. No, he's fun. I dig him. But obviously, the main charm of it is, at least for me, I just like seeing Rex and Shulk again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I who cares? I like the fan service. Okay, I'm allowed to enjoy that. And
yeah, of course you are.
Then, yeah, I mean, I hear like you obviously see with like the Switch 2, everyone's making their wish list, right? And you see Xenoblade 4 on some of these lists, and I'm like, I don't know if I want that. I guess I don't know. Obviously know the franchise is doing better than it's ever has been. So it's going to continue. I mean, hopefully. But I mean, I don't know what the naming convention is going to be, because if you do 4, that implies it's still connected to the Klaus trilogy. Like they can't go all Final Fantasy or Resident Evil and just keep numbering them. So I don't know what it'd be called. They might change it to Xeno something else, like Xeno Sheath, Xeno Dagger, who knows? Hopefully not. But yeah, I hope they just put a pin in this trilogy. Maybe we get X ported to the Switch 2. I'd be very happy to see that. And
yeah, I haven't played X.
Yeah, I played like 5 hours or so on the Wii U, but then I had to give the Wii U back. But
oh no,
it was. I mean, it was okay.
I mean, there are only like 7 left in existence.
Exactly. It's a really hard to come by. It's quite the privilege to play X. There's only about like 3 people who have beaten it. But yeah, I'd like to play that one day. But for now, I mean, keep giving us those remasters, I guess. Maybe 1 for 2. Maybe I think. I guess like fix the. It would be cool if we got like a bundle with all of them, and they fix like the lip syncing for the first 2 games. But whatever. Now this is getting into like really just wish list territory. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy with how this trilogy's ended, even if I'm not totally satisfied. I hope they just search for new, fresh stories. I know they've got another IP on Monolith, so I'm just keen to see what they got in store. Yeah.
Yeah, no, same. And oh shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh no, it's gone. Oh no, I remembered. I guess my hope for the future is I hope that they keep focusing on characters. Like the protagonists of every game are, a lot of them are so memorable, if not all of them are so memorable. And yeah, I think when you know your character and you know your cast really well, you know how they would respond in certain situations, and I think that makes for good storytelling. So
I think so. I think that's what's hopefully they're aware that that's what's gotten them this far. And obviously I'd like them to experiment, but within the realm of, still giving us, even on a very base, like vague outline level, like the magic of Xenoblade and Monolith. Yeah. I mean, I trust them. Great developers.
We'll see what happens.
We will see.
More twists.
More twists. Subverting expectations.
I mean, there's massive twists in every game. Yeah. All right. Xander, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And if you're listening to this right now, thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, please send it our way. Our socials will be in the description if you'd like to follow us. And if you're not following the show, please do so that you don't miss a future episode. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much again.